In this video, I will be analyzing the film Challengers through the lens of feminist theory. Challengers is a romance film that emphasizes the agency of the woman and disempowers the patriarchal ideals of the masculine superiority. This will be demonstrated through a historical context of treatment of women in films, and an analysis of both the characters' interpersonal relationships and how visually the film handles sexualization through the lens of the camera. Feminist theory in film was born out of a reaction to what people were watching on screen. For as long as storytelling has been around, romance has been a part of it, and with the creation of film as an art form, that continued to be true. Countless films over many decades included the trope of two characters falling in love with each other, but the way it was being executed started to get flagged. With the corporate Hollywood system largely controlling what films got financed and made, those films and their productions had to be acceptable towards what the upper class and by and large society as a whole deemed morally acceptable. What did that commonly entail? Films revolving around men, targeted for men. When women were involved, they were almost always treated as lesser to the male characters. They were typically part of a romance that gave the female characters less to do in the movie, with their arcs solely revolving around their love for men. This was not the case for male characters, who were free to have as many different traits and personality types and plot lines to experience as they wanted. They were allowed agency in those plot lines to do whatever. On camera, they were also allowed to exist in a non-sexual manner. Women who didn't fit the traditional societal standards of what was deemed pretty were given lesser roles, and women who did fit those standards were often viewed through the camera as a sexual object first and foremost. Clothing and makeup emphasizing that you, as the male viewer watching, should want to fuck this woman. The sexualization, combined with the women's lack of agency in films, sends a message to the male viewer that a woman's worth is derived from how pretty they are and how much attention they'll give you. These ideas make up the patriarchy. In the article Lost Objects and Mistaken Subjects by Kaja Silverman, she describes the power of the film as one that can provide some sort of desire of yours you may lack in the physical world. However, it does eventually go away. Quote, when a film covers over the absent real with a simulated or constructed reality, it also makes good the speculating subjects lack, restoring him or her to an imaginary wholeness. Silverman then relates this to gender roles by saying, ideal representations play a key role here. The male subject is protected against the knowledge of his discursive insufficiency through the inscription into the digestives of phallic characters, with whom he is encouraged to identify characters equipped with the phallic attributes of the absent one, i.e. with the capacity to look creatively, speak authoritatively, and capture and coerce the speech of others. However, projection plays an even more important part, since the male viewer can affect these pleasurable introjections only if he is able to disburden himself of the various losses which organize his subjectivity, if he is able to displace his discursive lack onto women. Once again, classic cinema engineers this protection for him. Through its endless re-narrativization of the castration crisis, it transfers to the female subject the losses which afflict the male subject. To combat patriarchal concepts, feminist film theory was developed, celebrating when female characters have an equal or higher amount of agency and control in a movie, and celebrating when there's a lack of unnecessary sexualization in comparison to male characters, existing purely to please the male gaze. As Sharon Smith requests in The Image of Women in Film, some suggestions for future research, quote, women must be active, not passive. Strong women shouldn't face constant ridicule and unhappy endings. Men will become more sensual in sex roles. While patriarchal ideas are still a rampant issue in movies, feminist ideals are much more prevalent now, and one film that conforms to those feminist ideals is Challengers. Challengers is a 2024 romance film with three protagonists, Tashi, Art, and Patrick. One woman, Tashi, two men, Patrick and Art. It starts with all three characters at a tennis match, Art and Patrick playing in it against each other, and Tashi watching it. The film non-linearly shows us events in all three of their lives, spanning 13 years that explain why this match is so important for each character. To analyze this film, I have to run through the plot of the film, the characters, and their dynamics. Art and Patrick are best friends in a tennis duo team who have an unspoken romantic love for each other. One day, they see Tashi playing at a tennis match and pursue her for romance. They meet up and all make out. Patrick gets into a relationship with her for a bit, which builds resentment in Art, but it ends at the same time as Tashi injuring herself and losing the ability to have a competitive tennis career. Art is mad for how all this went down and their friendship has ended. Sometime later, Art and Tashi meet up again, and he asks her to be his coach, which leads to a romantic relationship that then leads to a long career, marriage, and child. Patrick is alone, broke, and struggling with his career in the meantime. Art's career is successful at first, but he loses passion for the game and wants to focus on his family instead. Tashi isn't as present for Art as a person outside of tennis, leading her to cheat on him with Patrick twice, and all three characters feel unfulfilled in life, leading them to this tennis match. Now let's focus on Tashi, the woman in this love triangle and the main source of attraction for Art and Patrick. While all the characters are protagonists of the film, Tashi is the true focus of this film. Despite being the center of a love triangle with two men, her desires do not center around Art Patrick in terms of infantilizing herself for them. Tashi loves tennis first and foremost. It is her passion in life. She speaks about it as if it were a romantic relationship.
Yeah, but you're not a tennis player. You don't know what tennis is.
What is it?
It's a relationship.
To win that game is to be in control, and Tashi desires control. She is extremely self-centered and tries to be in control of everything revolving her, to the detriment of her interpersonal relationships. We see this in how she interacts with each of the men in her life. Let's start with her relationship with her husband, Art. Early in the film, Art tries to relax with his wife on the couch and love on her, but is rejected as she is fixated on his performance in a recent tennis match. After she said what she wanted regarding his tennis career, she gets up and leaves him. A later scene with them together further exemplifies how cold her marriage has gotten. Art's main concern regarding this fight is,
how are you going to look at me if I still can't beat Patrick Zweig?
His investment not being in his own tennis skills, but rather how his wife will react. To try and motivate him to win this fight, Tashi says she'll leave him if he doesn't win. He also brings up how he wants to quit tennis professionally, but knows the investment isn't his own. I'm playing for both of us. Tashi loves Art, but her investment in this marriage is revolving around his tennis career, not him as a person. Her actress Zendaya has echoed this statement in interviews, saying, "The need for power and control is now a means of survival. She is vicariously living through someone else, and she needs it to feel hope, like she has anything left of her own." She's getting to live out the career she always wanted through him, and he is subservient to her desires because he purely loves her for who she is. But she isn't getting to live out the career she truly wants, and he isn't getting the family life that he wants. Let's switch over to Patrick. Tashi and Patrick date during the second act of this film. During a sex scene, a fight breaks out between Tashi and Patrick because he asks her to stop talking about tennis while they're being intimate. The tennis speak clearly comes off as her not being fully committed to their romantic partnership, although she claims it to be purely technical. The fight breaks down a massive compatibility in their relationship, Tashi's need to control. Tashi asks him, "You're not a member of my fan club." Patrick responds, "I'm your peer, I'm not your groupie, and I'm definitely not your student." Tashi then just looks at him cold, as if she has no use for him. Patrick desires to be in control as well, and that's why she never would have committed to him alone. She needs someone like Art, someone subservient. In this film, the character's choices all revolve around the woman and what her desires are, even when the scene takes place between the two men. Tashi as a woman has complete agency, while the males of the film do gaze at her and find her as an object for eroticism. She has desires outside of the context of them, and chooses to interact with the men. If a man desires control over a woman in their erotic desires, they're going to be disappointed by the plot of this film, because it doesn't fulfill their own narcissistic identification. Supporting this, Tashi as a woman is undoubtedly feminine. She wears feminine-adjacent sportswear and clothes, dresses, skirts, makeup. The men in this film are undoubtedly masculine, their clothing being primarily unisex masculine presenting and being associated with phallic imagery. All of this to say, the film doesn't support a reading of masculinity powering over femininity in any way as a substitution for that identification. It is firmly about a woman in control of two men, subverting the long-running trend of the male/masculine desires being in control of the feminine. Now, where the film might divulge from some people's views on a feminist film is through its usage of sex and sexualizing its characters, including Tashi. In Laura Mulvey's article, Visual and Pleasure Narrative in Cinema, her article suggests that the path to rejecting a patriarchal view in film is to deny the audience any voyeuristic pleasures of fetishization. Quote, "The fact of fetishization, concealing as it does castration fear, freezes the look, fixates the spectator, and prevents him from achieving any distance from the image in front of him." In Marilyn Fahey's Feminism in Film Form, the author heralds the film I've Heard the Mermaid Singing as a positive feminist film, and does so by emphasizing how it rejects voyeurism and denies the audience of the pleasures of watching its female characters love each other. So, with a film like Challengers, one that shoots its characters in a sexualized manner and treats Tashi as a figure of erotic desire, how can it then stand as a feminist film still? Well, it maintains a feminist framework in two ways: by never fetishizing her outside of story context, and by comparison, sexualizing the men to a much greater level. To prove this, let me analyze a key scene in the film in detail. The bedroom scene. This is a scene in conversation between all three protagonists that leads to a three-way makeout, and yet it never once degrades the woman. First off, let's compare what each character wears. Tashi enters in an outfit that you could very reasonably wear in your day-to-day life. Meanwhile, the boys are almost naked when they're introduced, with plenty of close-ups on their unclothed bodies. Tashi enters this hotel of her own volition and is shown to ask the majority of the questions in the conversation, steering its path. She then gets up on her own and initiates the romance. As she kisses each boy, she chooses the order in which they engage and what they do. There's a moment where she tells them both to kiss her neck at the same time, the power dynamic clearly being in her favor. The characters then get into a three-way kiss that turns into a two-way kiss between the boys. Look how she physically leads them and encourages them to do this. Let's look closer at the shot where Art and Patrick start their kiss. The camera pushes them out of frame as we focus on Tashi's reaction instead. You would think that the camera would show us the romance first and foremost, but instead we're learning about what Tashi wants through her facial expressions. When it does hard cut into that shot of Art and Patrick going at it, the positioning is where Tashi is on the bed, as if we're looking through her eyes. This scene ends with her leaving mid-action of her own, because she got what she wanted. As she leaves and they request her number, she tells them to fight for it. Art asks her, "What do you want?" Tashi responds, "I want to watch some good fucking tennis." She is literally talking about tennis here, but the tennis is something more. Regarding the use of tennis in this movie, screenwriter Justin Kuritzk has commented saying, "We really wanted those tennis scenes to feel like the truest intimacy and the truest eroticism in the movie." This tennis match is a form of them proving themselves to her, fighting to please her. Tashi has agency in the story that likely wouldn't have been afforded to her if it was made by a filmmaker who favored patriarchal ideals, or at the very least, she would have been demonized and made a villain. Tashi as a woman is not just equal to the men in agency, but above them in terms of power dynamics. There are multiple other examples of the way the film handles her fetishization in a feminist way. Let's look at the scene where Art and Patrick watch her play tennis. It's a shot from a high angle because that's where Art and Patrick are in setting. Tashi herself is wearing normal tennis clothes and not doing anything that feels dehumanizing, just playing a normal tennis game. It's the way Art and Patrick look at her that inform a sexual nature to the scene. Their eyes glazing as they stare at her, close-ups on how they watch her and sexualize her. A similar moment occurs when they watch her dance at a party. She is once again dressed up in a way that is pretty and is meant to make her feel beautiful, but also doesn't feel contextually off or over-sexualized for the setting. She is at a party, and all she is doing is dancing with her friends, having a good time. The scene is shot from a farther away place. You can see her whole body and her friends in frame. No close-ups on her body parts, no clothing that's revealing. Once again, it's Art and Patrick's reactions to her that inform a sense of voyeurism. They're enamored, so we're enamored. The director, Luca Guadagnino, wants you to think that she's pretty, but you don't want to degrade her. Meanwhile, the men are shot in a much more sexualized manner. There are plenty of close-up shots on their body. We watch them do activities both sexual and not, in a manner of degradation. They're both objectified by Tashi, and therefore degraded by camera. Not to mention the phallic imagery in this film. As Art and Patrick face off against each other, they eat each other's churros, or eat a banana. Patrick intimidates Art by showing his penis to him. Their boners are shown on screen twice. Art and Patrick's masculinity is being tested here, and it's reflected visually on screen. So, by sexualizing all three protagonists, it evens out the dynamics that occur when only the woman is being sexualized, and by sexualizing the men much harder than the women, it further places the power level of the woman above the men. The voyeuristic nature of the film always places the objectification of Tashi in the context that another character is fetishizing her, not objectifying her for the sake of the masculine male viewer wanting to have her serve him. The opposite treatment is provided to the men, existing as objects of desire in a much more fetishized way because that's how they're treated by Tashi in their interpersonal relationships, and Guadagnino wants the audience to desire the men in a more sexual manner. In conclusion, Challengers is a romance film that exemplifies feminist ideals by letting the woman have just as much, if not more, agency as a person outside of her relationship with men. The film also doesn't sexualize her purely to serve the male gaze, giving the opposite treatment to the men. I believe the film serves as a great example of treating women equally, by portraying them with the same flaws that we've allowed men to show on screen for so long. Tashi is a woman that's strong in her determination while being morally flawed, and feels like a real person you or I could meet. Women are getting more opportunity to be in stories that treat them the same as men, and this film is a great example of that.